Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the NESN Pregame Chat. My name is Zach Cox, joined as always by my fellow Patriots beat writer Dakota Randall and former Patriots linebacker Matt Chatham. The Patriots will be hosting the 8-3 Tennessee Titans today at Gillette Stadium in a matchup of AFC heavyweights. The Titans are currently occupy the top seed in the AFC. The Patriots are just one game back of that spot at 7-4. On paper, this looks like a matchup of two of the best teams in the AFC. In practice, with the injury situation that the Titans currently are dealing with, maybe not so much. The Titans, especially on offense, are really injury depleted. They will not have star running back Derrick Henry in this game. They also will not have wide receiver A.J. Brown, wide receiver Julio Jones, wide receiver Marcus Johnson, also missing a couple players over on defense and both of their starting inside linebackers. So this is a team that really has been kind of running on fumes lately and will be matching up against a Patriots team that is the hottest team in the NFL right now, seeking their sixth consecutive win. So let's start with that because the Titans do have all these injuries on their offense. Defensively, from the Patriots, Matt, what are you going to be looking for here today?
Wow, I just think this happens to be a game where you caught the opponent at the right time.
Absolutely.
And it's unfortunate for what Mike Vrabel's dealing with his guys from his side of the football because they've had one of the biggest roster. They've used one of the highest numbers of players in the NFL.
Over 80 players. I believe it was 82 as of last week.
It's insanity what he's dealt with. And I think from what he has on his offensive side of the ball, I think they would show some resiliency. I think the notion that they've even been in some of these games the last couple of weeks, they lose by 9 points a week ago, but with a -5 turnover differential. They're going to have to manufacture it, though. I think everyone kind of understands what they're up against on that side. And as bad as it was for them a week ago with Houston, it's a little bit worse this week. And I think that's why this makes it such an uphill battle for them. Losing your starting right guard adds to the notion of all the thinness with the wide receiver group. Losing, help me with the name, the second running back. They've also
Jeremy McNichols, yes.
McNichols, excuse me.
Third down guy, pass catcher.
Yeah, so the other offense from the backfield guy is now gone in addition to Henry, right? So it's just we keep going down the line. We presume maybe Foreman will be the guys that gets carries. They gave him a little bit a week ago against Houston, and the running game really went nowhere. So they do get both of their tight ends back healthy. I don't know. Does that mean explosive 30 points of offense? Probably not. But this is sort of a roundabout way to say that this feels a little bit to me like the Cleveland game, in that fully sort of Arsenal. Yeah, this is a much different feeling game, but as torn down as that group is right now, you just don't want to give something to them. So I would be very surprised if Coach Belichick does something that's overly aggressive. It's not a game to go blitz and go get Ryan Tannehill. It's not a game to thin back in coverage to try to steal a play or two. It's more, see if these guys can go 12 and 14 play drives, a little like Carolina as well. When you realize they're shorthanded, you typically want to play everything top down, tackle really well, which has been something the defense has done a great job of. Tackle great on the back end. Adrian Phillips and Miles Bryant and some of these extra add-in guys have been excellent in open field stuff. But that's really where you sit. They're going to have a hard time going the length of the field. You mentioned Marcus Johnson. That was another name that's obviously not a huge name for that group, but in the absence of Julio, with AJ being held down, he had a 100-yard game a couple weeks ago, and now they lose him too, right? So we're looking at a collection of receivers that are relatively young guys, a fourth-round pick that they had this year that hasn't been playing for them in Fitzpatrick, correct?
Des Fitzpatrick.
Fitzpatrick, who gets activated. They held him on practice squad even as a fourth-round pick. Today's probably going to be his big day, but you got to love those matchups across the board. You just can't have broken plays. The last thing I would sort of kind of keep your eye on here is Ryan Tannehill in the pocket. Now, this is something that we've been talking about since Ryan was a Dolphin. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. I use the analogy with the Cleveland Browns. I think he's a much better quarterback than Mayfield. So I think he does a better job of making something with nothing, right? Ryan is really good early in the count, and he's really good late. In other words, you don't want to get into extended plays where he leaves the front of the pocket and takes off. He can get yards that way, and a lot of his broken play receptions end up happening later where he moves down and sort of resets himself in the pocket and makes a play. He's also really good at the spread stuff where you get it out quickly, quick read and shoot it. So all that is basically to say that pocket control is very important. You just can't have the broken plays with Ryan. You can't let him escape down the front. If you box him in and knowing the other complications they have with their weapons group, I think this offense is going to really struggle to even get to 2 scores.
I think you can see a lot of similarities between this game and the Cleveland game. Yeah. As you mentioned, Cleveland obviously was without their top 2 running backs in that game. No Nick Chubb, no Kareem Hunt. That's another team that likes to run the ball, loves to use play action. They really couldn't do either of those things against the Patriots
Built
here.
Much the same way as far as how good they are defensively as well. That's really the profile of both these teams, but depleted similarly.
Absolutely. A lot of similarities there. Dakota, defensively, what are you looking for here from the Patriots?
Yeah, I love the comparisons to the Cleveland game, especially what the Patriots can do if the opposing offense is one-dimensional. So I'm really looking for the Patriots defense to get at least 1 turnover in this game. You were talking about Tannehill. I think we all can agree he's a better quarterback than he was when he was with the Dolphins. He's really cut down on his interceptions. I think a lot of that has to do with the Titans managing around his flaws and really relying on the Derrick Henry running game to not put too much on Tannehill's plate. But since Henry's gone down, they haven't run the ball well. It's been a one-dimensional offense. His interceptions have gone up. He leads the league with 12. A lot of that is because he threw 4 last week against the Houston Texans. And did you know that in his last 7 starts at Gillette Stadium, Tannehill's thrown at least 1 interception? So I think odds are that he makes a mistake with the ball today, and then it's on the Patriots defense, which has been so opportunistic in this winning streak, to capitalize on it. And if they do that, if they win the turnover battle, like you, Matt, I have a hard time talking myself into the Titans having a path towards scoring enough points to win this game.
Yeah, this has to be a no big plays type game for the Patriots defense. You just look at the talent that this Tennessee Titans offense is going to have in this game, and it really isn't there. It's a lot of replacement level or below players, honestly. If you're looking at their receivers, you mentioned Fitzpatrick, there'll be Chester Rogers in there, Nick Westbrook-Akine. They had Golden Tate.
Good job on hitting the full name there.
Thank you. I was practicing that one. They had Golden Tate on their practice squad, scooped him up this week, did not elevate him for this game. They elevated Cody Hollister, Patriots legend, spent a season or 2 here. And then at running back, it's Deontay Foreman, it's Dontrell Hilliard. There's just really not that top-end talent here. So I think the Patriots just need to avoid what gave them issues in that first half of the game against the Houston Texans back in Week 5. That was another team that just really lacked talent offensively, but you saw a practice squad receiver beat J.C. Jackson for a deep gain. You saw just some secondary breakdowns. Obviously, the Patriots were able to kind of lock that down in the second half, and they've been certainly far better really at every level of the defense ever since then. But I think that's what's going to need to happen for the Titans to have a chance of putting up enough points to compete with the Patriots in this game. I think if the Patriots can just avoid those kind of big-time defensive breakdowns, I really have a difficult time seeing the Titans moving the ball. You did mention the tight ends earlier. Anthony Ferkser had a good game against the Patriots here back in that playoff game, caught a touchdown, had a big 3rd down conversion late in the game, so that could be a notable matchup for Kyle Duggar, who's been a lot better in man coverage against tight ends lately. But overall, it's tough to see the Titans moving the ball very well in this game.
It bears mentioning that even with Derrick Henry, they played in that style of game in the divisional playoff a couple years ago. Was it divisional or was that
It was a wild card.
It was a wild card, yeah. So, but what was it, 14-13 right till the end there, and then they get the pick 6, it ends up making it. So that's the style of game they're going to have to be comfortable, and they're very comfortable. They've won in that style. Just expect them to need to drag them down into that. They're going to love it if it ends up 17-13 or something along those lines.
Absolutely. Offensively for the Patriots have outscored opponents 175-50 during their 5-game winning streak. 3 of those have come on defensive touchdowns, but overall, a lot of the advanced metrics do say that the Patriots' offense has been one of the most productive and efficient in the NFL over these last 5 weeks. So offensively in this game, what are you going to be looking for?
Well, as I started to study Tennessee's defense, I mean, one of the things that is usually a hallmark of some of the groups that are better is that they have real playmakers at all the levels, and I almost count 4. I know that there's, your front, your linebacker, and your back end, but I think it's your edge of your front as well as the interior front, your linebacker level and back end. Byard on the back end is one of the best safeties in football. A hawk as far as tackling down in the box, but he'll also catch the ball all over the place on the back end too. He's just a playmaker. Look for him stripping stuff from piles. He's just dangerous, and Mike's got a real nice chess piece there. On the linebacker level, it's usually Rashaan Evans. He's one of the better middle linebackers out there, but he's been gone for a bit. He won't be out there today. So they pop in 2 younger guys. Monty Rice, I believe, is one of the spots, and Jayon Brown at the other. Smaller linebackers, 5'10"-ish, 230. So it's the small, quick guys that are often coverage style guys in nickel and dime, but now they're full-time roles. They have no choice. It's the extra guys are added in. As far as playmakers on the edge, locals are going to remember whatever. Harold Landry is obviously a 10.5 sack guy now. He's been excellent for Vrabes. What he's done that I didn't see him do as much at BC, he often spent most of his time on the right end, and he was just known as the get-off guy. Excellent burst, speed rusher, not a lot of counter moves necessarily, but Mike has used him as more of, we would call it a buck. Basically, he moves around the formation. You'll sometimes see him on nickel and dime, off the line, stunting with other guys. He just makes plays. So he's the guy where an offensive line, the back group that's in protection, will just simply say, find Harold Landry. We got to get that guy accounted for. You don't want to see the three one way and one another, and they don't pick him up and a guy comes free. That would be Harold. You really have to pay attention to him. Jeffrey Simmons on the inside is the other. One of the better, he's like a leading Pro Bowl guy as an interior guy. He's a stud. So they have playmakers. The issue they have is the thinness in the spots around them, right? They're dealing with a little bit on their side. Both on the inside guys are off. But one thing that I would say after kind of looking across the performances they've had, win and loss, a couple of these close ones recently, they really make it difficult to run on you. And I was like, okay, maybe that means non-running game today for the Patriots. But they also make it difficult to pass. They kind of net everyone lower than their norm. You know, they're going to get the passing yardage totals for virtually everyone they played for the last 6 weeks will hit somewhere between 225 and 275. Nobody has 300-yard games against them generally. And running game, it's really hard to get 100 yards, right? So they're pulling people into that style. So my thought for the day for them is I wouldn't want to move yourself too far outside what your own norm is. Try to do some wild thing to play them. I think you kind of have to stick with what you're best with. My view is they need to run the ball first, create those play action opportunities, and just very insistent on not turning the football over. Matt cannot take sacks. You cannot have the strip sack against Landry, not have the penetration play from Simmons, just not give it up. And I think putting yourself in less risky situations has actually worked for other teams. Just don't turn the ball over against them. Final thought, I have a hard time in games of this style. I think it really helps to have a really deep group at tight end. You guys can go a little deeper into that if you like, but the tight end group today, I have a hard time on as things get a little cooler here, seeing the ball outside the hashes, or excuse me, outside the numbers. So it could be a really nice day for those guys. Pull the ball to the middle field and play within yourself.
According to reports this morning, both Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, both of the Patriots tight ends, are expected to play in this game. Also, Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, their top two running backs, both reportedly expected to play. We'll see on Trent Brown, their starting right tackle, missed a practice this week with a calf injury, was able to come back on Friday, but he's still listed as questionable. We'll see how that all shakes out once these inactives come out in a little bit here. But Dakota, offensively, what are you looking for here?
Yeah, I think Matt got a lot of the X's and O's covered. So I'm looking at a storyline that was kind of a big topic this week in Mac Jones' first real game in cold weather. Now, I mean, maybe it's just because we're from New England, but it doesn't feel that cold today. But for someone that's not used to it, it might be pretty cold for him. And this is really his first crack at it. We don't know how he's going to do. I think it's something that we took for granted a lot during Tom Brady's career here. One of many things is how consistently good he was in the cold weather, but we've seen it time and time again. Quarterbacks who play either in domes or in warm weather cities, they come to Foxborough and they struggle, at least in their first time, playing in a cold weather game. So how's Mac Jones going to do? You know, we don't know. We talked about it this week, how he's leaning on Brian Hoyer for advice. He said he's not going to do the glove, at least not yet, and that's something that Tom Brady did throughout his career. So we'll see, and I just think it's interesting how it's, you know, I think it's going to be, high 30s today. And so that's not that cold. It's probably going to be colder for those two Bills games, maybe the Jaguars game. The Patriots are fortunate enough to host a playoff game. Those will all be colder, so I want to see how Mac Jones does in a game that's just kind of in the mid to upper 30s.
Yeah, this will not be a game like the playoff game the Titans had here back in, what was that, 2003? I'm sure you remember that one, Matt.
Oh, I do.
It will not be quite that cold, but for a quarterback who's from Jacksonville, Florida, who played his college football in the SEC, it'll certainly be a little bit different than the environment he's used to down at Alabama.
One other point, there are a lot of new Patriots players on this team that I mean, I'm sure they've played in cold weather games before, but we're so used to the Patriots always doing well in cold games, but there's a lot of new players and young players here. It'll be interesting to see how a lot of them do in their first cold environment.
It'll give a little bit of a preview about how some of these guys might handle it once it does get to true New England cold over the next couple of weeks. Offensively for me, Matt, you touched on it a little bit. The Titans have only allowed 100 rushing yards in one of their last 10 games, only twice overall this season. This is not a team that has been very susceptible to rushing attacks, opposing rushing attacks. So I think this, I'm curious if Mac Jones is going to need to maybe do a little bit more in this game than he has. Not in terms of personal performance, but the Patriots might need to put a little bit more on Mac Jones' shoulders in this game if they can't get that running game going early against this Tennessee Titans team. On that same token, though, we could have said that exact same thing about the Cleveland Browns a couple of weeks ago. Cleveland Browns came in with one of the NFL's better run defenses. Patriots were able to put up 184 yards against them, and I think that really opened up a lot for Mac Jones in the passing game. Mac Jones also had one of his best games, probably his best game as a pro in that game. So I think overall, this is going to be a defensive game in my mind. I have a hard time envisioning the Patriots just really torching this Mike Vrabel defense. Mike Vrabel 2-0 against his former team as a head coach. I believe he's held the Patriots to 10 points back in 2018 and 13 points in that playoff game in 2019. So he knows what Bill Belichick likes to do, obviously from spending so much time here in New England. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Patriots are able to attack this Titans defense.
They're built a little different this time, too, and I think that's the one thing that is distinct from the 2019 season and the earlier year when he faced them. They talked a lot about it, and I think that's very interesting. You know, when they go to the mic, they're echoing what Mike's told them. Harold Landry talked a little bit about this. Tannehill mentioned it. Harold actually made the point that our defense needs to outplay their defense. And he said Mike's been preaching that all week. And what that essentially means is he's saying that we've got to create some turnovers of our own, and we've got to basically outplay their unit because we cannot expect our offense to go score 30. And they also talked a lot about run stopping. And whenever you get a defense that walks in the room, one of the first things they talk about at the podium is that the other team is very physical up front and they love to run the football. That says, so the modus operandi here is we have to prevent that part of the game and force them in. They mentioned Mac is accurate, Mac is composed, but they didn't go over their toes to talk about the passing game, which tells you that I think their greater concern is stopping them initially. So I actually think Braves would be thrilled if Mac sits out in gun and does the read option stuff and tries to spread it out. I think Mac can absolutely feed off play action, but they have to make a reason to make the play action real first.
One quick note about the running game. I think with that Cleveland Browns game that was impressive, but there were some recent performances that indicated that it might have been a little fool's gold with the Browns rush defense. I don't think that's the case with the Titans. I think they're a legit run defense. So if the Patriots rushing attack has a good game today, I think that would say a lot about where they are.
Closing out here with our choice segment, our betting segment. Currently, the Patriots are listed as 7-point home favorites in this game with an over/under of 43. Matt, where are you feeling here?
I think in the betting world, we see big numbers like -6.5. It ekes up to 7, and that makes you so nervous. Like, oh, it's such a huge number. The deficits the Patriots have put on other people in the last few weeks are wildly above this, right? So you're so nervous. Can we go a full score? I just tend to think that if we were having this conversation in January as a divisional game or maybe a first-round game with this team and they were fully loaded, I would not touch a single score deficit for either team. I wouldn't want to touch that. But I think the Titans are pretty dramatically depleted today, and there's a good chance that this will be a comfortable Patriots victory. Not a great chance. I don't love this pick, but looking at the other options here, I'm going to go ahead and go with the Pats to cover on that -7.
Dakota?
The over-under, it was 43.5 a little while ago, came down to 43. I'm taking the under on that. For all the reasons we talked about with the Titans offense, it's hard for me to see them getting even 15 points this game. And if they can't do that, if they do that, the Patriots have to get 28 points or something. And so I could see the Patriots offense doing that, but I think the Mike Vrabel factor is real. I think this defense is very good, and I think they could drag the Patriots down into a close competitive game in the fourth quarter. So I think 43 is a little high for me. I'm going under.
I agree. I'm going under as well. Cold weather, good defenses, familiar teams with the Mike Vrabel and Patriots factor. I think this is going to be a low-scoring kind of grinded-out game, and I do like Mike Vrabel to keep this close with the Patriots. Even I would be picking the Patriots to win in this game, but 7, I don't know. Gives me a little bit of pause. Gives me a little bit of pause. But that will do it for this week's NESN Pregame Chat. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Zack'S. You can follow Dakota at Randall NESN. You can follow Matt at Chatham58, and you can follow along with all of our Patriots coverage pre, in, and post game at NESN.com.